皆様お待たせをいたしました。
Thank you very much for waiting. We will now start part 2 of 2017 Goi Peace Foundation Forum. First, we would like you to enjoy the performance of the Native American flute. The performer is Mr. Mark Akixa. Please take a listen to this beautiful sound that talks to you from the tranquility of death. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Akixa. This instrument that I've just played, this is the Native American flute. It's also called the Indian flute. And as the name tells, North American Indians, the indigenous people, they used to play this wooden recorder. A young man, when he proposes a woman, he would play this flute to court the woman. So this is also called the love flute. In Arizona, in the United States, there was a time that I was living in Arizona, and that is when I encountered this flute. My meeting with this flute, through that, in North America, the Hopi tribe, these people are said to have been least impacted by Western civilization, and I started to have exchanges with the Hopi tribe as a result of my meeting with this instrument. Hopi people live with the wisdom of nature. Everything is connected. That is what I have learned from the Hopi people, and that is what I would like to express through playing this instrument. The Hopi, the term Hopi means peace in their language. At this Goi Peace Foundation Forum, I would like to play this instrument of love, this love flute, and it's a great honor to be able to play this instrument in front of you at a great forum like this one. Let me play another song, Amazing Grace. That was a beautiful performance by Mr. Mark Akixa. Let us give a big round of applause to Mr. Mark Akixa.
Now, Mr. Saionji, please. It was a very good flute performance. I can feel the resonance of a sound, and it's very beautiful. Now I would like to start with a talk session. So let me introduce you the speakers, the laureates. Kenny and Nina are joining us in the talk session. Thank you for being here with us. And we have a guest, Mr. Nao Suzuki. He is a representative of NPO Greens. He also editor of a web magazine, Greens. His father is British and his mother is Japanese. And he was born in Bangkok and went to elementary school and junior school, high school in Japan. He went to a Japanese school in Japan, but the military type of physical exercise in Japan, a education that is set within a framework, it seems that was something that he could not get accustomed to. But at the 3/11 earthquake, not 3/11, the Hanshin Awaji earthquake, he participated in volunteer activities and he met many people. And he got interested in contributing to solving social issues. And he's now active in that area. The major reason why I invited him today is that he attended the Bioneers 3 times before, the first in 2006 and also last year he attended Bioneers. So we hear about it, but we have not participated. So the best way is to hear from someone who actually attended Bioneers, so I asked him to be here. Thank you. And Mrs. Masami Saionji is here with us. So this will be the 5 of us here in this talk session. So we had heard the speeches from the 2 of you, so I want you to take a short rest. And I want to start with Mr. Nao Suzuki. Actually, you attended the Bioneers conference. So could you explain a little about it using the screen? It is better to have an image by looking at images. So could you tell me your experience at a Bioneers conference as the one who attended the conference? Yes, could I have a screen on? In 2006 and 2007 and in 2016, I attended Bioneers 3 times. This is last year when I attended Bioneers, the Japanese team group photo. Many of them are present here today. In 2006, I started a web magazine, Greens. I will talk about it later, but in making a web magazine, the members who were working with me said there's a great conference, so you have to go. And they nearly forced me to attend the Bioneers conference, and that was my first experience. And later, I knew that Miss Mayumi Oda, who is in the middle of a photo, she is a person who connected us. She's there. And this is how it looks like in California. about 1 hour north from San Francisco in San Rafael. A very beautiful city designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. A beautiful place, a very vast space. And the main session, in the morning, as you can see on the photo, this dome was used for the morning session. And in the dome, this is how it looks like inside. What is impressive to me is that it starts from a prayer of the indigenous people. The indigenous people who lived in San Rafael come to start with a prayer, wishing for the success and wishing for the harmony with nature. So I think this represented Bioneers very well. The morning meeting, as was mentioned in the speeches earlier, the latest civilization people are here to create the future civilization. There's a presentation who are like thinkers observing the civilization of the latest people studying the theory of a space, or people who study about mushrooms. And also we hear about the tradition of indigenous people. And I remember there was a marine biologist studying about the turtles, which is very inspiring. And the photograph is Eric Haggins. A leader of a group called Black Panther, leading the civil rights movement. I wondered what she was going to talk about. And the conclusion was that you should encounter yourself and hug yourself to create a new society. I was very impressed with that. And also there are other people. This is an economist, a global authority of environmental economy, Paul, and many people like that come one after another to speak. And their speeches were very impressive and moving. So that was a morning session. Biology, ecology, environmental science, from different points of view, we can hear their story. And so the world that we can see from their pursuit, what we can learn from the indigenous wisdom by pursuing nature, and also environmental activists, social activists' point of view about the latest world is also talked about. And also people talk about the human mind. Human mind or heart is important. So environment and human mind are connected in the root. I could hear that very much in the Bioneers. And so they are connected. So how to create a civilization in harmony with the earth? We could hear an insight about that. That is what Bioneers is about. This is how the audience looked like. Every time there is a speech, there is always a standing ovation. So everyone was feeling as if we were one, and also danced by the youth. Last year, I was surprised that, well, 10 years ago, they were not doing that, but a lot of young people invited for free to the Bioneers, in particular young Native Americans and African Americans. Many youth were invited. So this is a place to develop future leaders. After the morning session, I went out to the garden, and many people are around doing different things. This is in 2006. Miss Mayumi Oda is dancing hula in the middle. So many events are taking place here and there. And recently, based on the Palma culture, there's a hands-on workshop. At night, there is an exchange of seeds. As Kenny was saying, Bioneers started from exchanging seeds. So exchanging seeds is not physical exchange, but is about the philosophy behind the seeds, or as about species and life itself. I believe the thoughts were expanded. And the basis is exchange of seeds, which still is important. And in the hall, there's a lot of arts. There are many artworks. This is not well known in Japan, and what's interesting is social engaged art. Art is not something to be looked from outside within the frame, but to have everyone's engagement in the society to complete the artwork. This work, there are many questions at the top, like what words of advice might your ancestors give you now, for example, and you write that on paper and glue that on the wall. Or this person was making the different forms of the bee hives that are made in different forms. And also there are young people like poetry reading, making speeches and dancing. So other expression activities were conducted by the younger people supporting the conference. And there are prayers in many places. So I also was feeling the same. And in Bioneer as a whole, what was impressive to me is that life is taken after to next generations, and diversity and culture is expressed in arts. And for sustainability, the connection among people and activism in the society, all of those are put together in a philosophy. They're trying to make a philosophy in trying to create the next civilization. So I was very excited by this. As was mentioned in the first speech, the Earth is now being destroyed. So how should we live on Earth? What kind of society should we make? We are facing a very big question, and they are trying to find the answer to that question. So I was very impressed and shocked with their activities. To place importance on your own mind and on others, to have more richer relationship with others, and to be grateful to the nature and live based on the yield that nature is providing to you. That is something that I also thought was important, and this led me to the creation of the group Greens in Japan, and also felt a lot of hope. This is in the evening, the young people are getting together to dance. Bioneers as a whole, I could feel a very big hope. There are so many people trying to find a new philosophy, a new way of living. As Nina said, everybody is a Bioneer. We feel as if we are a family, and I felt very encouraged. Another thing that was impressive is that in Bioneers, through the activities, the activists who passed away, there is a speech honoring those who passed away. And by listening to that, I could feel that we are in a very big flow to heal the earth and heal ourselves, to create a new relationship. There's a very big flow taking place in many places in the world, and the Bioneers is a hub trying to realize that. The people who go back from here in many places in the world would try to heal the world and the relationship in their own way in different places. So I was very impressed, and I could feel a lot of hope. And I just started. It was just before starting the web magazine, so I was very impressed. I got a lot of inspiration and couldn't sleep. I didn't know what I was looking for, but a sort of guidance for me to keep living was indicated. I think that is the reason why Bioneers could continue for 27 years and is catching the minds of so many people. So to place importance on your own mind and on each individual, and have a better relationship, and to be grateful to the environment, nature that is supporting you, and how can you use that in developing your lives and the society. As I have already said, I was very excited, and I feel the same even now. So I hope Bioneers is a very great occasion. So if you're interested, please try to visit Bioneers. I hope you should participate Bioneers if you want to do so. And I hope we can expand Bioneers movement in Japan. There are many members who are trying to do so in Japan, so please join the movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a detailed description of the conference. We are now able to capture the image of the conference. People, variety of people from different generations coming together, and a variety of programs. It's a 3-day program, I understand. So we have been able to get an idea of what this conference is like. Kenny, earlier in your speech, you mentioned that about the birth of Bioneers. It started in a hot tub, Japanese-style hot tub. There are various issues people have, and the origin of that was your own illness when you were young. What I heard is that you went to various doctors of Western medicine, but you weren't cured. And then alternative medicine. You turned to alternative medicine and you found that the cause of your disease was dioxin. And ever since, organic, renewable energy, alternative medicine, something centering around nature, placing importance of nature, you were gravitated towards that direction. Can you talk about that a little bit, about yourself, how it got started when you first encountered nature, when you started to think about the importance of nature? What about the disease that you had? I understand that that was your trigger. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, I was very fortunate. Let me take my earpiece out. My father was a teacher, taught at Columbia University in New York City. And as a teacher in the US, you get 3 months off during the summer. And so each summer, my family, my brother and I and my parents would go to the country outside New York City. And it was very safe in that time, and we just got turned loose with our bicycles and our fishing poles and our crabbing nets and my baseball bat, and we could go anywhere, anytime. And my brother and I just lived outdoors. You know, we just loved it. And we didn't know to think anything of that. You know, it just was the way it was. You know, many years later, I realized how critically important that experience was, to be connected to nature in that way. It was, you know, to just be out there on your own and just living and learning how things work and being in and with nature. And that had a profound impact on me forever after, that I didn't really understand until much later. But with my illness, yeah, it was caused by chemical poisoning. And I was not able to be helped by the doctors, and I was pretty desperate, and I knew that just intuitively I had to get back to nature, and I ended up moving to New Mexico and then to a small farm outside Santa Fe with my first wife. I got, you know, I started to learn about all kinds of natural therapies, including actually acupuncture, and a Japanese sensei who was very powerful. So I worked very hard outdoors. I learned how to farm. I decided if I was going to eat meat, I needed to be able to kill an animal. And one of my neighbors raised sheep and cows, and so I did that with him, and realized that I was okay with that. It was not a pleasant thing to do, but it was the circle of life. And I was very lucky because there were people who had gone back to the land at that point, and they were doing some of the first solar builders. They were doing composting toilets. They were doing, you know, all kinds of natural building. We helped to build our own home. So I was very lucky to get that kind of an education, a real education. And in the course of that, I was, you know, obviously very preoccupied with my own illness. But one night I got a call from my mom in New York City telling me that my father had cancer, and 6 months later he was dead. And it was a very traumatic experience. And it shook me out of my own personal drama. And several weeks after his death, I actually got this newsletter in the mail that I hadn't asked for with stories of terminal cancer patients who had gotten well using certain types of therapies. And at the time, I thought that was completely ridiculous, and I was actually very hostile to that idea. I thought it was very irresponsible to be saying things like that. But with my father freshly buried, I decided if there were anything to that, I wanted to learn about it. And to make a very long story very short, I've discovered that there were, in fact, many alternative treatments that have value, and he had ended up making a movie about that. But you know, the thing that I'd like to say about the illness was I was in tremendous pain for many, many years as a result of this, with nervous system damage, to the point where I really wasn't sure I wanted to be here. You know, it was that bad. And you reach a point where you have to decide if you want to live, actually. And that's the key moment of transformation, where you choose to live. And I was very fortunate to have my first wife before, you know, I met Nina, and a woman I'm still very, very close with, who's the mother of my daughter. But her love really saved me in many ways. And then I chose that I wanted to be here, and I made a commitment that I wanted to give back, you know, based on what I had learned that I was able to do to help heal myself, and I wanted to give back. It was that simple. And I think in a way, humanity, our whole species, is at that point right now. We're in a sort of a hero's journey, and as a species, we're facing our own mortality. And we have to make a choice now whether we want to be here or not. That's the first thing that it's a spiritual choice. This is not about technology. The solutions are present. That's what Bioneers is all about. We know how to deal with almost all of this. And some of it is going to be a predicament. Climate disruption, you know, we're going to have to be adapting. It's very tragic that we've done this to ourselves and to the many other species, but we can get through it. There are ways to do that. So I think it's more a point where, as you know, you look around the world, and it's not the people who are the problem. It's the governments, it's the, you know, the financiers, the 3 billionaires who have as much money as half the world's people. These are the issues. And I think people around the world want to live decent, dignified lives, you know. So I think that's the choice we all need to make as a social movement, as a movement of movements, is enough. Enough is enough. Let's do things differently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think you referred a little about the wealth gap, income gap. And in the Fukushima nuclear accident, Mr. Kiyoshi Kurokawa, who was the chairman of the investigation committee of the nuclear accident, sent me a report that now the global population is 8 billion. And out of that, 4 billion, half of our population's asset. And as of 2010, it was equal to the asset of 380 people in 2011 and 177 people, or 159 people in the following year, and 92 people on 2013, and 80 people in 2014, and 62 people in 2015. And only 8 people last year had an asset of 40 billion, that is 4 billion, half in the world. He isn't here now? Okay, why don't you stand up, Mr. Kurokawa? Your research is so famous. So it shows that the society, that the situation in the society is that you have to correct. If I may deviate, Nina, I'm sorry for deviating Nina. So that was a background for Kenny, and you started Bioneers together. So Nina's background is entirely different. So why? Well, of course, because you got married, that is one reason, but why is it that, like the Seeds of Change and Bioneers, how or why did you decide to conduct the same activity together? Could you introduce to me your background, Nina?
Sure. Well, like Kenny, I grew up actually in a city, in New York City. And like him, although we didn't know each other at the time, I learned very early that nature was the place where I went for solace. When my parents were fighting, when I was scared and uncertain, I went to the park. And there's actually a funny story that happened when I was quite young, because I had a very large collection of stuffed animals that lived on my bed. And one day I decided that I needed to bring them to the park. And I put them all in shopping bags, and I brought them to the park, which was not very far. And I apparently was old enough to go by myself. And I brought all the animals to the park, and I set them all up in different places in a very large tree, because I thought they needed to go back to nature. And then I left and went home. My parents were very unhappy. And when I went back to the park, they were all gone. Really, part of what happened for me that led me to work with both Seeds of Change and Bioneers was an experience in a garden. Kenny had been invited to come see a biodiversity garden that was being cultivated in southern New Mexico. And I went with him and had this extraordinary experience of getting out of the car and being given a tour through a garden that was where this master gardener named Gabriel Howarth was growing hundreds of varieties of food and herb and flower plants, and many of them endangered and very rare. Many of them were either heirloom or traditional varieties, many that he had collected from indigenous people. And he gave us a tour through this garden. And as we went through the garden, he introduced us to each plant. He introduced us by the Latin name and then by the common name. And then he explained how it was related to all the plants around it. And the garden was unspeakably beautiful. It was a riot of color. And he invited us to taste as we went through the garden. And so we were tasting things I'd never heard of. Herbs like lemon licorice mint and chocolate basil. And there were whole societies of tomatoes. And this was in the late 80s. And there were rare species of quinoa and amaranth, these beautiful, unusual grains that had been staples of the Inca and Aztec people. And there were sunflowers that were like 8 feet tall, that had heads 18 inches across. And they seemed to watch us as we walked through the garden. And my senses were dancing. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was, and the smells and the sights and the sounds. And then he began to explain to us how this extraordinary arc of biodiversity was endangered. And much like the concentration of wealth you just named, how all of these tiny mom and pop seed companies were getting gobbled up by multinational corporations, and how this incredibly precious arc of the diversity of food plants that really is our fail-safe, as Kenny said, against extinction. It's what we need to return to when our food supply is threatened. He explained how that was threatened. And by the time I left that garden, when I arrived, I had been working in the arts. And when I left the garden, I felt as though the spirit of the natural world sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're working for me now." And so I went to work for what was to become the company Seeds of Change that Kenny co-founded, and then later Bioneers. And it was a very sacred time in my life where I just felt like I was serving the diversity of nature, which was the most sacred work I knew to do.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
じゃあ、今までの話を
Having listened to that,
会長、さっき
Chairman, Chairperson, can you give us your impressions of the earlier speeches? Well, young people, the essay contest for the children's category and youth category, the essays were beautiful. And the future of the humankind is not to be written off altogether. We have such beautiful, wonderful young people to create our future. It was so full of hope. 12 years old, and Ms. Neha from India in the youth category. You have such high levels of essays that you have written. We, the older generation, have learned a great deal from you. And Kenny and Nina, their talks. Well, yesterday I already had a discussion with them over dinner for about 3 hours. Masculine and feminine. Well, from the Fuji Declaration, we have said that feminine, it is as a bird has only one wing that is moving. There is no balance. We need to have the feminine wing. If you stretch out both wings, then there's going to be balance. And you will be able to change the world and yourself. And we also heard from Mr. Suzuki, these young people, the young people in this audience, our days, we have gone through various eras in order for us to succeed. Education, careers, going up the ladder of success, it's not materialistic things that we should be focusing on going forward. That used to be the focus, but as you work toward that path of success, politics and nuclear power and IT industry, we see emergence of such industries. But you have to question, what are we here for? What should we do? That's the question. Nature, going back to our origin, I think we have an opportunity, a window open to us right now. So the two laureates and the children's essays and Mr. Suzuki, what he described, there's a great deal we can learn from nature, being one with nature. You can only learn from nature because we're one with nature. People who don't learn from nature, disregard nature, don't appreciate water. Nutrients that we get from animals, they are not appreciative. They are only concerned about their own success, how to build their career, how to become more rich. They're only focused on materialistic success. Then they lose sight of their origin. They take that for granted. Education of our children, well, we're seeing increasing numbers of bullying and children taking their own lives. Small lives, beautiful lives are being taken by themselves. This is terrible, but we have to come together as one. People from different backgrounds, different experts in different areas. We have to bring together wisdom to try to come up with a solution through dialogue. That is exactly what Bioneers are doing. And SOW and Fuji Declaration, Soul of Women. People who are successful in different areas coming together to create a movement, a very big movement to change the world. But what we have been doing in the past, we try not to criticize what has been done in the past, because if you start to criticize those things, there's going to be negative energy created. There will be some forces that will come out to crush you. So stay still. And what I want to tell you is, we heard from each one of these speakers the importance of learning from nature. Nature with its life. There is no scheming things. We're let to live. And all the humankind, we have life, a drop in the sea. In that drop of water in the sea, all the elements of the ocean is included in that just one drop of water in the sea. It can create a typhoon, it can create floods. We human beings, if you're just thinking about your own country, your own interest, your own religion, people will be isolated. And we are headed toward destruction, our own destruction. What we need to do is revert back to nature. Think about what we should do in order to lead a happier life. Education in the past, study to beat others, beat the competition, become famous, be successful, and make money. That used to be the conventional thinking for certain generations of people. We have to turn that around, turn that upside down to create a new world. That is what Bioneers are doing and what indigenous people have been doing, treasuring one's life, treasuring others' lives. Let me say a little bit more. Another thing I want to say is, why are we oriented towards that direction? Because people don't value their life enough. People think that they don't have the ability. They have negative views of themselves. People don't focus on the beautiful things that they have inside. People believe what others tell you. Children believe what their parents tell them, that they're not good enough. But every person has value. Each one of us have value to live. We have precious life. We're all equal. Nobody is superior than others. We are the same. We live together with all life in the world. We should go back to our origin. We should treasure what we are. As we heard from Kenny, he learned from nature. He had his awareness to live. He made that decision to live. So our awareness, we shouldn't depend on others. We want to be like other people. Your neighbor has a car, you want a car. We have to make a switch. We have to really reflect upon ourselves. Think what you really want to do. You don't have to be the same as others. Diversity and oneness. Races, peoples. We have been separated in the history, but we are one. Everyone has life, and we have value in our life. We have great life, creativity. We have everything inside us. We should look at that to know your abilities. You don't have to compare yourself with others. Everybody has a different fingerprint. Nobody is the same. Everybody is different. We should look for differences, and we should treasure life for every one of us. Hope, a beautiful way of life, what we can learn from nature. We heard from the speakers. We talked about going back to nature and learning from nature. Going back to nature is something that we have to think about once again. Rather than looking outside, look internally in yourself. Be immersed in nature. We heard that the Native American flute. Go back to that spirit because it's healing. That's healing music. I think we should go back to our origins. Thank you.
Well, thank you. As was mentioned, you talked about SOWs. So perhaps some of you might not know it stands for Soul of Women, which is an initiative started. Some of our members are present here. So far, in particular, in the materialistic civilization in the 20th century, that was developed by the masculine ability to compete and through their power. But that led to negative heritage. So masculine and feminine, there must be a good balance between the two in the society. Not only about society, but within individuals, there is the feminine and masculine in one individual. So we must become a balanced human being. That is the purpose of the SOW activities. On the other hand, Nina, you talked about cultivating women's leadership. You have this program, Cultivating Women's Leadership, which I think shares the same idea. In the current day society, the importance of women's role in the society, like some things may be better to leave in the hands of women rather than men. There may be cases in which women would do better than men. I heard about it. So could you give you some specific examples about it? What do you think is necessary in the present-day society? And what parts of the feminine do you think is necessary in the present-day society?
Well, it's a big question. One thing that I think I would refer you to is a book that I think is a really useful reference. It's called The Athena Doctrine. And it's a study that two men did where they actually polled people from 13 nations around the world, representing 65% of the gross domestic product of the world. And over 100,000 people were polled, and they were asking them basically about the masculine and the feminine and how leadership needed to change. And what they found was that 2/3 of them, 66%, and one of the nations was Japan, by the way, 66% agreed that the world would be a much safer and better place and more peaceful if more men thought more like women. And, you know, again, we all have masculine and feminine within us, but I believe that in many ways, the feminine in us, which leads from our heart and from our bodies and from our spirits, has been suppressed, and that we have become a people who lead principally from our intellect and without the support of all of our other ways of knowing. And a lot of the feminist research that's been done has said women rely on other ways of knowing. And some of that is probably because of biology, and some of it is probably learned. But as mothers, you know, it makes sense that we learn to listen not only with our ears, but with our hearts and with our senses. We have perhaps a more developed capacity for more ways of relating to our surroundings, and for a greater transference of information from our left and right sides of our brains. And so what they find in women in leadership is that women bring a greater contextual awareness to decisions. Women, both in politics and in inter-nation communications and negotiation, have been more successful at negotiating peace. In the US, I don't know what the case is here, but in the US, a very large percentage of the leadership of civil society right now is female. And it just happens that that's the case, you know? So, you know, as I mentioned in my speech, the data is confirming what our lived experience is already showing us, that as we improve the status of women and the equity of women, everything in society gets better. And I believe that there's something that we women bring to this reinvention of our civilization that is related to our connection to the earth, you know. We are connected to the cycles of the moon, and the moon controls the tides all over our planet. And so there is a biological connection that's kind of mysterious. I don't pretend to understand it, but I do know that many of the women that I've worked with over the years have a really deep, strong, intuitive, and dreamlike affinity with the mother, our planet. And many native peoples, many indigenous peoples, believe that we humans are here to bridge between our mother, the earth, and father sky. And if that imbalance has involved more connection with Father Sky and not enough connection with Mother Earth, that's one of the ways we're gonna restore balance. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I read somewhere that indigenous people, women manage money and manage resources because that's better that way. I read about that somewhere. Thank you very much. And Bioneers conference has 3 pillars. That is what I hear. One pillar is natural medicine. Natural medicine is something that Kenny has already talked about earlier. And the second pillar is nature's solution. Solution to be learned from nature, or biomimicry. And the third pillar is biocultural diversity. Biocultural diversity. These are the 3 pillars in Bioneers conference. In your earlier discussion, you gave an example of biomimicry. You talked about mushrooms. They have chemical compounds. What was it? Sarin, was it? Sarin, yes, sarin gas. Could be decontaminated through mushrooms. That was so interesting. For example, radioactive material. This is a very big problem. Radioactive waste. How to dispose of such radioactive waste. Radioactive waste with nature's powers, if that could be cleansed or decontaminated, is there such a way that can be thought of? Is there such a way, possibility?
No, not so far. That's the one area where they're, the solution is to keep it in the ground, Freezing is something I know is being used around Fukushima now as well, freezing the ground underneath it. But essentially, there is nobody knows anything yet at this point. There are many other approaches short of that. But do you want me to talk about some of the other things, or?
Yes, if you could give me some other examples of biomimicry. If you could talk about some other examples, some other approaches, just briefly.
Yeah, well, actually, here in Japan, this is from what I understand through reports, there was a big problem with the bullet trains that would go through tunnels in very crowded, populated areas, and they would create a sonic boom because there would be a big change in pressure, air pressure, from the outdoors to going into a tunnel, right? And so someone who I think was on the board of the railroad, perhaps, was a birder. He loved birds and studied birds. And he wondered, is there a bird that changes pressure zones very radically, very quickly? And sure enough, it was the kingfisher bird, which dives down at 60 miles an hour through the air straight into the water to grab fish. So it's a big change in pressure. So they designed the front of the bullet train, the engine, to be in the shape of the beak of the kingfisher bird. And now there are no more sonic booms. So that's one very good example. Another one here in Japan, I don't know if you are familiar with slime molds. They're pretty disgusting, but it's a single-celled organism that all it does is engulfs its food and eats it. And it can grow very large to like the size of your fist, one single, it's a big ball of mucus, basically. And so anyway, one of the traditional tests of intelligence that scientists have used is whether an organism can solve a maze. And what the slime mold does is it fills the entire maze and then immediately contracts to the very shortest distance to the food source. And it does this impeccably, perfectly every single time. So now biomimetic designers are using slime molds to design traffic flow patterns and pipeline architectures, because they're brilliant. Slime molds, this single-celled ball of mucus, is better than our human designers at solving these kinds of problems. So I think it makes us very humble. And there are many, many, many examples now, but green chemistry is actually one of the most significant areas of big breakthroughs. A person that we've had at Bioneers several times, John Warner, who's really a genius in this field, but he has now come up with a cure for Alzheimer's. that's going through through the NIH and in the National Institutes of Health in the United States. They've come up one after another. You know, the thing I'd like to just make really clear is we're in a revolution across the board. We are living at a unique moment in history. This has never, ever happened before, and it is a life and death moment. I mean, it is, you know, do or die, as they say in English. But the breakthroughs are coming so big, so fast, it's hard to even keep up with them. You know, we talk about biomimicry, but Paul Hawken, whose photograph you showed, has done remarkable work for many, many decades in the environmental area. But his new project, it's a book that just came out called Project Drawdown. And the reality is the carbon in the atmosphere is already over 400 parts per million. It's not a matter of that being sustainable. We actually have to start to draw it out of the atmosphere now and bring it back down to pre-industrial levels, below 350, in fact, is what it looks like. There are countless ways that we already have to do that, right? And the top one is actually soil, is organic farming and soil sequestration of carbon, which organic farming is fantastic for. That's the single best thing that we could be doing. Same with holistic rangeland management. It's actually good ways to manage cattle that will also decrease the carbon in the atmosphere. And I think the third, maybe top technology is educating and empowering women. So, you know, the solutions are present. This is for real. You know, not everything. I mean, not radioactivity, for example. But for many of the most important things that we need to do, we know what to do right now. But the examples go on and on and on for biomimicry. Many, many examples.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
まあ未来をより良くしていくためには
To make a better future,
いろんなそういう取り組み、それから
we have to take different approaches, and each individual, what can individuals do is another question.
鈴木直さん
So, Mr. Suzuki,
おそらく
I believe
の影響だと
you're influenced by Bioneers.
そういうサステナブルの
You're actually,
ためのにプライベートな生活自体も
you change your own private life to make a sustainable society. You are trying many things on private.
参考にね皆さんに
For our information, could you tell us
どういうことに
what you are doing
注意して生活をされているのか
in your daily life?
その辺ご紹介いただけますか
Could you introduce that to us? Could I have the screen? When I first went to Bioneers, I was still living in Tokyo. And in 2010, I moved to a place about 1 hour and a half by train from Tokyo in Misumi City in Chiba Prefecture. And now, I was greatly influenced by Bioneers. I'm trying to yield a small life, a place with sea and forests with less burden on the environment. I'm living together with my peers to live together with my colleagues. It's my 7th year here. I live in a small house because there's less burden on the environment and less waste and less consumption of fossil fuel. And also, I have impressions that you lose your fat and also you can increase your hope. So I have recommended this to others. I'm holding workshops to others. This is how it is inside my house. It's not that small. And recently, I have started a local currency. There are about 120 members now, and almost every day we hold different events. Like in Isumi City area, there are many farmers. Whenever there's a typhoon, all the pears were damaged by the typhoon. So the members of the local community asked me to call our peers to collect the damaged pears, and we asked for donation. And also in events, we mutually ask for each other's help. So it's like a small local business to hire local people, to procure locally, and return to the local people. So there's a lot of small local businesses being supported. And as a next project, I'm starting to think of a peace and permaculture dojo. This is the place in Isumi City. I rent this house with my peers. All the colleagues that we went to Bioneers together are here. So this is a Bioneers team acting together. And in December last year, I did a crowdfunding and I collected 6.5 million yen. And this is a 0.9 hectares area land. We made a forest garden with permaculture to learn more about the society and peace. The same about the NPO Greens activities. There are three major issues in the world, as I see. One is that many people have not encountered themselves. Unless you know yourself, you don't know how you feel, and you don't know what is the nature inside you. You cannot feel the nature inside you. You don't know what you really want. Your body is the closest nature to you, so you must feel that by yourself. For instance, through meditation or mindfulness or information detox. And I also hold a non-violence communication workshop or system thinking and communication, and also technology to build your own life is lacking in the society. I was born in Bangkok. I stayed in Bangkok until the age of 6. Technology to build your own life. If you learn that, you can feel that you have power in yourself. And through that, I can make a basis to create a new society. I make my own food, self-build, and off-grid technology, technology to repair. We are practicing that in Greens and the dojo. And the third one, the first essay presented today mentioned is the problem of loneliness. In the developed nations, Japan is a country with the most serious situation of loneliness. In the society of capitalism based on money, people work for 2 long hours and have to commute from far places, so they cannot develop their own local community. You don't even know the name of a person who is living next to you. That was how I used to live. So to recreate the community, like a local currency, a microcredit, and a small magazine, a local media development, and also community organizing. In starting a social movement, this is a message of the methodology, and for instance, President Obama was a community organizer, so there is a very long history in the U.S. I hear that started from a Japanese person who immigrated into California, and since they were not treated fairly, they wanted to find a way to be accepted by the American society. And 100 years later, the community organizing came back to Japan. A school type of learning occasion is provided. So in that sense, to encounter yourself and to be able to build your own life and technology to build a community, I think that is what I wanted to tell you today. Thank you very much.
Time flies. The theme here is drawing a roadmap to a new civilization. This is a big topic, but on an individual level, thinking this on an individual level, as we heard from Mr. Suzuki, he talked about what he's practicing on an individual level, and from Kenny and Nina to everyone here, what we can do on an individual basis. If you could give them advice, what we can do on an individual level. Kenny and Nina, please.
Well, I so appreciate all that Mr. Suzuki is doing. It's It's very exciting to me to hear about. Thank you. And in many ways, it exemplifies the essence of what I believe is at the heart of our transformation, which is a shift from a focus on things to a focus on relationship. Fritjof Capra, the great Austrian physicist, says the shift to an ecological society involves a shift in our focus from counting things to mapping relationship. And I think as now Suzuki was describing, what we all need to do is map relationship with ourselves and with each other and with the earth, because they're all octaves of the same relationship. And until, as you were saying, we really know ourselves, we can't, and until we learn to love ourselves, I think for so many of us, it's so much easier to criticize and judge ourselves than it is to appreciate ourselves and the uniqueness that each of us bring. I really believe we're each here in this moment for a reason and not by accident. And so I think the most important thing any of us can do is connect with what we most love and care about and wish to defend and protect, and be a role model for others. You know, it's so powerful what you're doing in creating a little slice of utopia there, a little model for how people can live in a way that emphasizes meaning over stuff, and connection and relationship over things. So to me, it's about, you know, finding that which is each of our unique gifts and connecting it with a need for reinvention in the world. And I think it's an extraordinary opportunity. It's hard work, but it's also the most fulfilling thing I can imagine. And I wish it for everyone. So that's my best counsel. Kenny?
ありがとうございました。
Yeah, I have enough trouble figuring out my own life, so I never tell other people what to do, you know, but I think, you know, you're here because you already have an awakening and you have an awareness. And I would really like to honor Masami and Hiroo and the brilliance of your vision. You know, when we first learned of the Goi Foundation and looked at your vision and saw how aligned it was with that vision of Bioneers, and so much of it, I think, comes back to personal agency. You know, it's about taking responsibility and saying, as Nina says, I have a part to play in this, and I have a unique part. Every one of us is different and unique. There is no other you. And if you can see the need today and see, you know, we're here to relieve suffering. That it's very simple. It's not hard to remember. And many of us have children, we have grandchildren. I mean, this is not about us. This is about future generations and all the other species that are out there. You know, they didn't do anything to deserve this harm. So I think that this is an incredible moment of change and transformation in the world that we're living in. It's never been like this before, ever. And there's no question that absolutely everything is going to change. The only question is how. And that's where we come in, and we all have a choice every moment of every day, and every one of us is capable of being an angel or a devil, you know, however you want to look at it. So that's the choice we can all make every moment. And, you know, for me, I'm so inspired. I mean, part of what I think has kept Nina and me going all these years, yes, we're very inspired by the genius and beauty and wonder of the natural world, but we're also really inspired by human beings, by people, by the incredible creativity, ingenuity, and love and caring and compassion. I mean, it's amazing privilege to be part of this community of people. And so that's a lot of what keeps me going. I'm so inspired by the Bioneers and all the people that we've gotten to know and work with. And there's a real sense of community and of family. And, you know, I feel that so much with this room here, with the energy field that the Goi Foundation that you two have created and your team. So I'm just very grateful and happy to be part of it, and I'm inspired every day to get up and do this work. I mean, what better thing could I possibly think of? And I get to learn all the rest of my life. I love to learn, and it never ends, so thank you.
Thank you so very much. It is now time. Concluding remarks, I would like to ask the chairperson to make the final remarks.
Of course, I can never teach to others. There's something that everyone can do every day. It's very simple. Why is there bullying? Why do people think that I'm not good enough? Why do people think that I don't have a capacity? I think that is that words have power. Words have power and energy. So all the words you say, if that is negative, you are bad, you cannot do that. If your words are negative, you shouldn't do that. So it's very easy, regardless of your ethnic background, is that you say, you are wonderful. You always have something good. Life is sacred. Everyone has something wonderful. You must look at things that are good, but you should not look at things that are negative to criticize others. Those who criticize use the violence of words, and that violence makes the others react to that, so creates a spiral of a negative ways of thinking, leading to wars and battles or nuclear accidents. But if you say, it is all right, you're good, there's hope, then people have ability to reach a solution with yourself without depending on others, without learning from others. When you're really alone and think by yourself, everything is sacred, and there is a infinite wisdom given to you from nature, like the indigenous people. As Nina is saying, the words of the natives is the most sacred part, which is never lost, no matter how much there are artificial civilization and money, and there's material, and everything is easy, and everything is transported, everything, and you just have to keep eating and becoming fatter and fatter. Then, and there is organ transplant, and then you are not even allowed to die. Who will let you die? You have to decide it by yourself about your own life. Then you have to kill yourself if you're not allowed to die. Then you have to think about what is given to yourself, what you can do by yourself, to be grateful to others, even to say thank you to small children. Even when I clean the toilet, even people who are cleaning the toilet, I always say thank you, even though they are just doing their job. Just by saying thank you, you can feel that you are having a very good day. Just to say thank you, even to people who are doing minor work, they can become proud about their work. Then things get more beautiful. And even one day, just try to say something good to your children. Just to tell to your children that you should study more and become #1, but to give them hope, you just say you're not bad, you should work harder. Then the children will think that they're not good enough. But you can tell that everyone can fail. Even the elderly people, they have their own wisdom. Instead of thinking that they're not good enough, you must keep learning from everybody. And by learning, each individual can grow. People who are great, those who got the Nobel Prize award, that's not all. Everyone can provide you with words that you can learn. I'm grateful to the sun. In Japan, there's the Shintoism that believes that God lies in everything. We're taught that you should not do something bad because the God of sun is looking at you. So everything is sacred, even among the Indians and in Africa, or in Hawaii and in Japan, everywhere. the wisdom of indigenous people don't go away because there's something sacred for us to keep living. And that is where we are starting from. That is how I would like to close today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kenny and Nina and Mr. Suzuki. Thank you. And also Mrs. Saionji, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the speakers, and please give them a big round of applause. Lastly, I'd like to have a closing remarks by the chairman and the president. Well, thank you very much for coming here today. I could get a lot of energy from you. I'm very happy so many busy people are here, despite being a Saturday. I think you wanted to be with your family, but you're here to attend the award ceremony and the essay contest. Through your wisdom, I think we can find a new way of living. So together with you, I hope I can find our own way of living. And Kenny and Nina, I hope we can work together to change the world. Let us work together. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The approach of Goi Peace Foundation and the approach of Bioneers are very similar, and each, rather than conducting their own fieldwork, I think we share the same feeling leading to peace. We are both networkers, linking the people who are working towards that aim. So through this, I hope we can further connect our network and expand our network and be connected to other groups and create a critical mass. I think that is our mission. Next year or the year after next, we are going to celebrate the 20th anniversary. And with your cooperation, I'm very grateful to that. And on that occasion, the key partners of our networks we have, including the two of you, I'd like to invite all of you again here so that we can make a new step to the next era. Adding the younger generation, we want to create a new movement. So thank you very much for coming here today. Thank you very much.